Hi, welcome back to another episode of Nobody's Doing It Right, the podcast for those who are uncertain. My name is Kat. I am your host. For today's episode, we're going to talk about how failure doesn't really exist. And this is something that maybe might be a bit controversial to some people, but it's something I've had to learn throughout my life, and it's really solidifying in my mind now that there is no right way to do anything. And as someone who is a perfectionist, who has dealt with a lot of insecurity around not doing things the right way, the perfect way, the way that makes me valid or worthy or whatever other narratives there are, I realize now that actually failure only exists if you believe it exists. And yes, of course, like there are things in life that we're going to do that objectively did not turn out the way we wanted them to. However, only you get to decide if that's a failure for you. Someone else might deem it a failure. Someone else might say, well, you failed at that, or that was a failure. But that's only true if you believe it to be true. You might be able to see it from a different perspective, which allows you to feel like actually maybe a success, depending on how you want to see it. One example I want to give is I share in a lot of my videos and my content that I was in a long-term, 7-year long relationship. And that relationship was very good, very healthy, very secure. And it ended because people just grow apart, especially when you are together in your formative years, your early to late 20s. You change a lot, you grow a lot. It doesn't happen to everybody, but to some people it does. And that's just how life is. And it doesn't mean that it had to end in a very negative or destructive way, or that we had to force it to work out just because of how long it lasted. Things just happen the way they happen. And I remember someone asking me once about that relationship, how did I feel about the relationship failing? And they didn't mean it maliciously, and I knew that. But it was interesting to me that he used that wording, the idea of it being a failure, because to me, that relationship was a huge success. The fact that it was healthy and secure and stable and loving and, expansive, that's a success in my eyes. But it made me realize that to other people, the idea of something ending no matter how it was, how it progressed, is a failure, and that's it. And that's something that we can choose to believe if we want to. That's in your own perception of the world and of life. That person that asked me that question could have thought that failure meant something different, could have thought that failure meant a relationship that was not secure and stable, but lasted for a really long time. That's how I sometimes perceive failure, right? If a relationship is not healthy, if it's not loving, if it's not kind, but people stick it out because, well, that's what you're supposed to do. To me, that wouldn't be a success. That would actually be very devastating in my mind. So again, it just comes down to your perception of what you believe failure is. And failure does not exist unless you want it to exist, unless you decide it to exist. And that is such a powerful way to look at it. It's something that's made me feel way more empowered now as I've gotten older and I've allowed myself to have this shift in perspective on failure. Failure only exists if I decide that it exists. I decide if I can look at this thing and see failure or success in it. That's in my control. That's in my perception. And again, someone else might see what you deem to be a success as a failure. So who's right in that scenario? Because both of you have a different perspective. The only person that's right is the person you deem to be right. And I think some of us, when we are in our deep people-pleasing phase, or perfectionism, or, when we're conditioned to believe that other people, older people, people in power, whatever, are the ones that we should be following, right? Are the ones that we should be doing what we can to be approved of and validated by. We might be going by what they believe failure or success is. So when we do something that does not adhere to what they think success is, we think, oh, that's a failure. But it's only because we're making their perception the true perception. And it's not true. It's not objectively true. It is subjectively true. We get to decide what is subjectively true. And so we can take that power back for ourselves. Now, of course, there are things in society, in our culture, that if you don't succeed at can be very detrimental to you, your health, your well-being, of course, right? So I'm not trying to deny that. But I'm just trying to say that there are things in your life that you might be experiencing right now that you see as a failure, that show that you are just not good enough and not worthy enough, that you decide to simply change and now see as a success. You get to decide that. It might be something really small, and you might not know that you have that power, but I challenge you to try. to see if there's something in your life right now that you can actually flip on its head and to see in the opposite way. Because I am sure that there's something that you got from that situation or that process or that experience that actually could be very beneficial for you, even if it did not end the way you expected it to. And I think the idea of failure is very closely tied to expectations, right? Rooting yourself in expectation rather than the journey or the process. If you are too tied to expectation of this is what has to happen, I have to have this thing in order to feel valid, in order to feel worthy, in order to feel like I did what I needed to do, I succeeded, then when that specific outcome does not happen the way you expect it to, of course you're going to feel like a failure. So there is detachment that needs to happen here too. Detaching from a specific outcome, allowing yourself to indulge in the present moment and see success wherever you can see it. Because ultimately, it's your life, and it would be a disservice to you to not let yourself enjoy it, to see the things that you do and have done as successes. That's only a disservice to you. That's not benefiting you in any way. So why do we do that? Right? It is almost like this weird form of self-punishment to deny ourselves the ability to see our life as a success in many ways, and only seeing our failures, only keeping our failures at the forefront of our minds, or perceiving things that could be seen as successes as failures instead, right? We get to decide. So we're choosing to see things as failures when we could be choosing to see them as a success and making ourselves feel better. And I think the one argument against this would be, well, is that not delusion? Are you not keeping yourself in a state of delusion and denying reality? And it's like, but you get to decide what is delusional for you. You decide what your life looks like. You decide if the delusion, quote unquote, because, what does that even mean, right? But you decide if that delusion is beneficial or detrimental to you. And I think the reason people are hesitant to lean into delusion, quote unquote, is because they think, well, you're not facing reality. You're not facing the fact. And the fact usually that they're talking about is that you suck or that you are somehow unworthy, and you have to just face that fact. And it's like, why do we lean into that? Why do we let ourselves believe that? Why would you want to, if that is the objective reality, let's say, just as a thought experiment, let's say that is the objective reality, even though of course it's not. But the objective reality is that you are awful and you have to just face that fact. Why would we want to do that? What does that really do for us? What benefit is there really in that? Now, of course, yes, it's important to accept and recognize your limitations, places where you need to improve and grow some knowledge, grow some skills, sure, because that will benefit you in the long run. And the key here is to recognize where you are going to benefit. So if seeing something as a failure or not being delusional, quote unquote, is not benefiting you, it's only hurting you in the long run, then why would we choose to do that? Why? Again, I think that comes down to feeling like we have to punish ourselves for not being good enough, for not being perfect. But at the end of the day, you're the only one who has to suffer through that. You're the only one that's hurt by that. And that's not fair to you. And I think it's really important to take opportunities to be loving and caring towards ourselves. And sometimes that means choosing to see things as successes instead of failures. Because failures only exist if we allow them to exist in our minds. Again, you might have set out to do something and it did not turn out the way you wanted it to, but in what way can you see that as a success? How can that be successful for you? How can you reframe it? And I'm sure there is a way. I'm sure there is. Again, be mindful of your circumstances, of the things you need to do, responsibilities, of course. I'm not saying to ignore all of those things. The point is to be mindful of what keeps you safe and okay. And the people around you as well. We don't want to be doing things that hurt other people intentionally, right? But if you can look at something that you see as a failure and flip it on its head and see it instead as a success, because I am sure there is a point of success in there somewhere, a point of empowerment for you, why not do that? Why not take that power and take control of it and lean into it and let yourself feel okay and let yourself feel confident and let yourself feel like, you know what? Yeah, it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, but at least I learned this, or at least I experienced something negative and I showed myself that I can handle it, or I showed myself that maybe I need a bit more information here, whatever that is for you. I say this just because I know how painful it can be to cloud your judgment, cloud your vision with ideas of failure all the time. To only see your life and the things you've done as failure. That's so painful to lean into. And it doesn't help you in the long run. To re-hurt yourself, to re-traumatize yourself in that way over and over again by only looking at your life and your experiences as failures is going to hold you back from taking action, from feeling the momentum or initiative to do new things and step into new things and try again. So I think it's more beneficial in the long run for you, for others in your life as well, for the world in general, maybe, right? Because we're all interconnected, to see your failures as successes, to not allow yourself to see failure if you don't want to see failure, because it's going to let you move forward. It's going to let you do the things you want to do without feeling like, well, I failed the last time, so what's the point this time, right? It's only going to hold you back. It's only going to prevent you from living the life you want to live and just enjoying yourself and navigating the world from a pleasant mindset if possible. Of course, you won't always be in a pleasant mindset, and that's okay too. It's not about spiritually bypassing all your emotions or toxic positivity. But if you can find moments of positivity, of enjoyment, why not take them? So yeah, I hope this was helpful. I hope it was informative. I hope it gave you a different perspective. If you want to talk about these things with me one-to-one, feel free to book a call over on my website. I also write about these topics on my Substack, and you can follow my social media accounts for the rest of my content. Other than that, thank you for listening, and I'll be back again soon with another episode.